Someone left a comment on my last video that said, brainy version of Sam Sulek. And I gotta say, I felt very complimented by that. And the reason I feel complimented is because I have admiration for Sam as it relates to him doing his own thing. And that's kind of like, I think what people resonate with about his content is that he's just a dude doing his thing, sharing his thoughts, not being dogmatic about it, educating where he feels comfortable. And I just think the internet needs more of that. So it's a big part of the reason I'm doing this. So thank you, whoever left that comment. Thank you for doing it today. Brief intro. We're hitting chest, we're hitting back, we're hitting calves. Today's Thursday. Little context for the session before we get into it. Chest for me, lower on the priority list. I'm relatively happy with my chest development, regardless of whatever some of you may think. I'm pretty happy with it. My back is and always has been a high priority. I think my back is fairly well developed, but you know, your back can never be too big. So I will get into the nitty gritty details of how I'm thinking about structuring the session. During the session, you'll kind of see the way I laid it out, but overall, I will tend to hit like 4 back movements, 2 chest movements, keep the chest stuff minimal. But if any of you have been watching, keeping up to date so far, you will know that everything I do is to failure. So without further ado, let's get the workout. All right, people. So I start off the day with calves. And warm-up weight here is about half of the stack. You all, by now, if you've seen my other training videos, you know I like to keep my warm-ups as brief as is humanly possible. The way that I like to structure this day when I do it in my apartment gym is because there's, in general, very few people here. I will essentially giant set thing or super set things. So what that means is I will go from doing the calf raise to doing a chest movement to doing a back movement, or in the context of today, calf raise to back movement to chest movement. For back stuff, I will do 3 sets on everything. As I mentioned, back is a high priority. For the chest stuff, I do 2 sets per movement. And for the calf stuff, I basically just do 1 set of calves on this thing for literally every set of every other exercise that I do. So in total, I don't know how many that will be, but calves are a high priority, so I do a lot of sets for them. And because of the fact that I'm just kind of used to doing a lot of sets, all of them to failure, I've been able to recover from everything and grow from them. So warm-up is done on the calves, so I'll do a warm-up on the back, and then I will do a warm-up on the chest. So as you can see, if I just simply turn the camera a little bit, this is kind of where I will be doing the chest stuff. So this will be out of order actually from how I'm actually going to be doing it, but that's okay. So for upper chest related stuff, because that's what I'll do first, really simple but useful thing to keep in mind is just that in general, the wider arm path stuff is going to be more upper chest focused. So if you think about kind of where your upper chest fibers run, because they're upper, they're kind of running like this, they're more horizontal. And so they will be most active in motions that look kind of like this. So whether it's a press or a fly or some combination, the upper chest stuff, very simply, is kind of at this angle. The middle and lower chest stuff is kind of at this angle, which may be obvious to some of you, but not to others. So the way I kind of like to set this up is higher cable angle. Arms do not need to go as far back as possible. So one thing you do want to keep in mind about the upper chest is that it is not a mover of the shoulder girdle. So what that essentially means is that when you're doing an upper chest movement, you just want to focus on moving your arm, like kind of like that, not necessarily moving your shoulder blade all over. You want to let your shoulder blade naturally go where it's going to want to go. You don't want to restrict its motion because it will naturally move back on the way back and forward on the way forward. But the biggest difference between the upper and the lower portions of the chest is that the middle and lower portions of the chest, they have a really strong ability to move the shoulder girdle. So when I do the middle and lower pec motion, what you will notice is that this kind of shrugging back and up thing and then shoving that shoulder blade forward is a really, really big part of the motion. Whereas with this upper pec type of thing, I'm really just focused on this kind of range in front of the body, because by the time your arm gets here, regardless of how much you move your shoulder girdle back like this, your upper pec isn't actually stretching more, which is a little confusing to some people, but yeah, just focus on motion of the upper arm. So now in terms of lat movement for the day, to start, I'm going to be doing something that's more upper lat focused. So one really easy way to kind of simplify lats is the more vertical lats, the ones that are kind of run lower, they're going to be moving the arm and the shoulder girdle like up to down. And the upper lats, they're going to be moving it still up to down a little bit, but much more horizontally. So with upper lat stuff, stuff kind of on closer to the top, you want to think about more horizontal, and then with lower lat stuff, more vertical. So today I'm starting with upper lats and then lower lats. And the first time I train back, during the week I start lower lats and then upper lats. And then upper back is always after lats, just because lats are a priority for me. So as it relates to like, single versus double arm motions, I will generally structure my training so that I'm doing one single arm motion per session for back and one double arm motion. And I will alternate what is the single arm versus what is the double arm. So for example, I'm starting with an upper lat thing that's going to be single arm, and then I'm going to do a lower lat thing that's going to be two arm. On my first day, what I do is I do a lower lat thing that's single arm and an upper lat thing that's two arm. Not necessarily any rhyme or reason to that beyond, I think it's good in general to have single-sided variations in your training for groups that matter to you. So you'll see something very similar mirrored in my arm training, where on one day I'll do something that's two arm for a group, and then on another day I'll do something that's one arm. So I think a mix of like two arm and one arm training is really, really valuable, both from the perspective of like correcting size imbalances, if that's something that you are concerned about, and also just from an overall function perspective, it's good to kind of, I think, pick motions if side to side there are differences that you have to kind of account for those. So one of my shoulders, for instance, moves a little bit like a different path compared to the other. My left shoulder and my right shoulder are very slightly different in terms of like how both of them are comfortable. So doing something that's unilateral like this can be quite helpful in doing that. So this is going to be my first set. I'm going to start with the pulling, and because I'm already warmed up on calves, I'm going to go there second, and then chest is going to be third. So you see kind of when I get done with that extension, there's a lot of room left to do the partials. And I don't know, I kind of just feel like to a large degree you're leaving some gains on the table if you really never get into that range. So something I would advise is, if back specifically is a priority, during your cable pulling motions, either do a set where you're ending in partials, or just start with the partial range with a heavier load. Specifically because of the fact that, like, if all you do are pulling motions where you fail here and fatigue here and then don't ever do this portion of the range, it would kind of be like only ever doing leg extensions and never any squats. Will you grow and make good progress if you're training close to failure? Absolutely. But do I think that you'd be leaving something on the table? Also, yes. So left side now. I'll go over a couple things in terms of tips for this after. Okay. So a couple really important things to keep in mind here. Your main anchor brace for this movement is your opposite hand. Your opposite hand is doing kind of two things simultaneously. Number one, because it's here, it's preventing you from getting pulled forward. But also, think about what would happen if someone just pulled one of my arms. I'm getting twisted to my opposite side. So what you want to keep in mind is that because you're getting twisted and also pulled forward, you want to not just push forward, but also a little bit of like a push in here. So it's kind of like a diagonal that way type thing to keep you from rotating away from the working arm. A lot of times what you see people doing on single arm pulling motions is that we'll get pulled forward, and then a lot of the movement is actually not just this, which is what it's supposed to be, it's this plus a lot of this, which will involve a lot of the obliques, the trunk rotators. So make sure that you're really firmly planted here. And then also make sure that because this load is going up to down slightly, you want to think about driving the elbow down, not just on the way down, because that's the easy part. The harder part is to keep thinking down as you come up. And so that's really how you define control in an exercise, is you're always resisting the force of whatever you're using. So if you pull down like this, and then you start to kind of like pull your hand upward as you're letting it go forward, you're losing the eccentric tension on your lats and you're distributing it to your elbow muscles. And or, this is more common, people pull and then just kind of drop. So pull down, but then as your hand is moving forward, think about keeping your elbow down, almost sweeping it away from you on the eccentric. That's how you're gonna actually be able to load more into that lengthened position. So now I'm just gonna bump right over to calves. And this is why, cardio is important to do, is like, you can do stuff like this, or I don't feel like I'm losing any kind of output on anything. Although it may sound like I'm breathing quite hard, I can assure you I don't feel that. It's more just the mic picking up my breath. So in terms of calf raises, a couple things to note. I really like a long pause in the stretch and the short position. I just feel like calves are one of those groups where it's very easy for the foot to start to take on a lot of the load if you're not really careful about paying attention to the end ranges and maintaining tension. The other thing I would really advise that all of you think about here is you want to think about moving your heel as much as pushing with your foot. If you only really push with your foot, you're going to kind of almost claw the platform. But if you think about pulling your heel toward your butt, remember the calves move the ankle, not the foot. So when you're doing this, right, when you're pushing down, you almost want to think about like a string. Imagine someone has attached a string to the back of your heel. And as you push, you're not just driving your foot away from you, you're also taking that string and you're pulling it upward, kind of toward the back of your knee, right? Because that's essentially what your calves are. They're just a string that pulls this way. So again, string attached. In order to move this away from you, you're thinking about pulling the string up like that, less of like a foot pushing thing. That's how a lot of people end up just clawing at the foot platform with their toes and then feeling a bunch of stuff they don't want to feel. So that was one lat, one calf. And now, honestly, just because I don't feel like moving this bench back and forth, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a guess here about what will be a decent height to do the upper chest thing at. And what I'm going to do, this is also, I think, potentially very useful from like a principled standpoint of how to make adjustments kind of on the fly like this. If you think about principles, guys, you don't have to worry about what setup you have access to. So if the cables are up here, instead of stepping forward, because I don't want to be pulled, I don't want to have to manage getting pulled backward, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hinge over like this and do it this way, right? So you all see how whether I'm sitting forward and doing a cable fly like this, or whether the cables are here and I'm just bent over, right? Same exact force, that's all that matters. So again, for upper pec, you're thinking about bicep to the kind of chin area, and that's kind of just what I'm doing in terms of setting up the load. I'm reverse engineering from that particular point. So I might get pulled up a little bit here, but not enough to really matter. Okay. All right, so it was one round down. We got 2 more back, an infinite number of calves, 1 more upper chest. Also, just one thing that I wanted to make abundantly clear here. If the gym were really busy, I would not drag a bench up here and be hogging this thing and that thing. So if the gym were really busy, I would probably just pick one station at a time, do all my sets there and then move, or just figure out a different setup or group of setups that I could use more conveniently. Yeah, so once you finish those full extension reps, you want to get to a point where if you're really trying to fully fatigue the upper lats, you're ending up just kind of with that depression, retraction type of motion. The one other thing that I did want to mention about technique here is very important to have your same side foot forward. So you know I'm not like on this side of the bench trying to use my left foot, which can work. I just find it less convenient. I also put this thing on the wrong setting, but oh well. So same side foot is forward. That's going to be your plant foot. So in regards to single arm pulling, it's always going to be or in general, it's going to be a matter of same side foot forward to essentially serve as your hip anchor, and then opposite side hand like we already talked about. And remember that opposite side hand is resisting not just the forward motion, but also the twisty motion. So just keep that in mind, especially as you get fatigued, because as people's lats get fatigued, if they start off really nice with the arm, they tend to start to transition into the twisty thing pretty quickly. One other thing that I did want to mention in regards to calves is in terms of foot placement, you want to get to a point where you are not quite on the balls of the feet, but you are placing your foot so that the platform is right below the balls of the feet. So you definitely don't want to be on your toes, and you definitely don't want to be like this, where the edge of the foot plate is in the middle. You want to kind of be in between those 2 points. So what I do is I'll find the balls of my feet, give a subtle amount of pressure, and then go from there. Okay. Also, as it relates to bent knee calf raises, when I have access to a good seated calf, I will split the volume between straight knee and bent knee on one of my days. So I train calves twice a week for, on each day, a total of maybe 6 to 8 sets, all to failure. So, we're looking at like 12 to 16 weekly sets or something, approximately that much. And I will look to do about maybe 10 or so, 8 to 10 or so of the sets with a straight knee, and then the rest bent knee. But here, unless I jerry rig the leg extension setup in a weird way, I just stick to the straight knee variation. So back to chest. Again, just one more set for upper chest. So I know it will not seem like a lot to some of you, but 2 sets for an upper chest thing, 2 sets for a lower chest thing, twice a week if my math is correct. That is 8 total sets for chest, all to failure, which is not nothing, and it's certainly been enough to sustain growth and progress. So okay. All right, so done with that movement. One more of these guys, and then we'll move on to the next pair. From here forward in this video, I'm not going to film the calf sets anymore because I feel like, who cares? You kind of get the point. Okay. All right, so second lat movement of the day, second and final lat specific movement. It's just going to be a pull down, 2 arms. Couple things to keep in mind about context of this pull down. Number one, I am intentionally going to do it so that it is just in this top portion of the range. Why? Well, because on my first day, which was Monday, 3 days ago, I did a similar vertical pulling thing, but it was single arm and I was getting all the way to the bottom. And yeah, I do the same thing that I always do with partials at the top, but I kind of wanted to treat this just like a top half partial type of motion. So that's why I have it like I have it. You can go the full range, but I like to do something where I'm really focusing on just the top portion of the range. That's the stretch position. It's also, the top half of the range is where, from a muscle length perspective, those lower lats are gonna see the most amount of change. So I don't like to be totally upright like this, but a little bit leaned back. Keep your abs on, and then just grease the groove. I kind of like to treat this mostly as like an armpit dominant motion, which sounds a little bit weird, but basically what it means is I'm not pulling with my hands. I'm really thinking about shrugging up and shrugging down as the primary action. And it's almost like my upper arms and my hands are kind of following that. So that's the first thing to really think about when it comes to lats overall, is lats are really freaking good at moving your armpits. And then secondarily, their role is to move the upper arm. You have these other shoulder extensors, the rear delts, the teres major, that are really good at moving the upper arm, but only the lats are really, really good at doing the shruggy, unshruggy thing. So first set here, again, really milking the top. One other thing, again, I just briefly mentioned it to keep in mind, is a really big mistake that people make on pull downs for lats is they start to lean back, not with their hips. So here's me leaning back with my hips, right? Just everything is moving as a unit together. Here would be me tipping myself back with my trunk, right? So notice I am not arching my back to do this. I'm just keeping my abs on, I'm keeping my ribs down, and then I'm kind of just pitching my torso backward. That's really ideally what you want to kind of think about, is abs are on, arm path is slightly forward, not perfectly up. That's typically where most people will find the most comfort. Oh. So you see again, those final reps are really just all the shoulder shrugging and kind of unshrugging. So with that, I will pair a movement for the lower pecs. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a movement unlike the one that I started with, where I'm really focused on moving my entire shoulder girdle. So what you'll see is on the way up, I'm really shrugging. On the way down, I'm really reversing out of that. Thinking about not just squeezing my biceps inward, but more so like my shoulder is tracking around toward the middle of my sternum. People view that as a mistake, the shoulders forward thing. It is not a mistake. On the knees, just because easier to stabilize. So again, you will know that you're doing this movement right if you feel your abs like holding on. I feel like I was maybe a little bit too vertical that first set, so I'm gonna do a little bit more of a lean this time backward. So one thing you'll notice as a kind of parallel between pecs and lats, and more specifically lower pecs and lats, is that those lower pec motions are essentially driven through that same joint action of you shrugging up and then reversing that shrug down as you press. So when you learn to do that shrugging thing, that sliding thing in either direction, I think that's one of the most underrated ways to actually make your shoulders healthy, right? Because like your pecs and your lats are your strongest, biggest upper body managers. Like, so when you think about, what is optimal for shoulder health, I can't think of two more important muscle groups to develop just from an overall strength, size, and breadth of function perspective. So if any of you are trying to figure out like, why do my shoulders feel fucked all the time? Definitely experiment around with like really paying more attention to those shoulder slidey motions. And the upper back motion that I'm about to do is one that basically emphasizes just pure retraction for the traps and rhomboids. So far we've finished chest, finished lats, and then we're just gonna finish off with upper back. All right, so normally I would set this kind of movement up on a chest supported machine, but because I don't have access to that today, you can see the principle here is very similar. Basically with this movement, what I'm trying to do is trying to train retraction, right? Which is basically just squeezing your shoulder blades back, but also slightly up. But notice that I'm not at like a forward angle, right? So if I put this down to change the perspective, I'm not trying to reverse or really retract at this angle necessarily, because I already kind of did something that was more in that direction for the upper lats. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to lower the angle and go a little bit backward and upward. So on the spectrum of like shoulder girdle retraction, if your arms are up here and you're pulling down, lower lats. If your arms are here, upper lats. If your arms are kind of here and below, like middle traps, rhomboids, and then the more that you move toward a shrug, the more upper traps, middle traps, levator scap you have. So I'm trying to basically just load essentially this angle of retraction. And to do that, chest support, tip myself forward, use that angle, and basically just train those mid-back muscles. So I'm gonna try to do this with a wider grip because I think it'll be more comfortable. Yeah, it's pretty good. The reason I would advise a wider grip, at least to start on this, is because I do like to leave a little bit of room for my elbow to bend just a little bit. If your arms are kind of stuck here, what tends to happen is your upper arm tends to get jammed. So as you're watching this, see what it feels like for you to keep your arm like this and try to pull your shoulder blade back, and then put your arm out here and do that. You'll notice that you can move much better into retraction if your hands are a little bit wider, and or if your hands are here, you want to let your elbow bend a little bit. So a bit of elbow bend is intentional on this, but just know that it should be something that is kind of an emergent property of you squeezing your shoulders backward. So I will do 3 sets here, and then I will be finishing off with rear delts. Oh. So I'll do 2 more of these. What you'll notice is that this movement is it's very, very subtle. A big sort of reason that I like to do these is because, even though your middle back is trained pretty well with horizontal rows, especially horizontal wider rows, it's often the case that those are not the tissues that fail first, and it's also often the case that people are not overloading that stretch position. So as is the case with the rest of my training, I like to just make sure that I'm checking the different boxes of, okay, I trained this muscle at its longer length, at its shorter length, and as long as I'm kind of checking one of those boxes at different points in the week, good enough for me. If I were to do this again, I would put the racks lower, but that's not gonna happen right now. One big mistake that people will make here, so the final thought on these, is when they start to really fatigue in that squeeze position at the top, instead of just decreasing the range and continuing to shrug or reverse shrug, rather, whatever you want to call this, shrug, retraction, not reverse shrug. A reverse shrug would be like that for lats. Is when people start to fatigue, they start to pull their chest off the pad, like they turn it into a spinal extension exercise. So just keep your chest glued and just try to just decrease the range as your muscle fatigue would have you decrease the range. Don't try to force it and just spinal extend the load, because the goal again is to fatigue the target tissue. It's not to move the weight. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, finishing off the session with a rear delt reverse fly. If you had a gun to my head and said, Ben, you have one option for rear delts, what's it going to be, brother? This is what it would be, brother. So how to set this up: pull your bicep to your chin, see where your hand goes, pull the cable there. Once you get there, I like to use a cuff. I like to put the cuff on the back of my hand like this, so my palm is facing the cable. Turn into the load, and you're just basically going to move so that the load stays in front of your body. So notice I'm not trying to pull. I mean, I literally couldn't pull past my neck because the cable's just going to hit my neck. But the reason that, I'm just going to do the set to failure as my first set. The reason that I like to do this for rear delt, and specifically in this range, is because all the other movements I just did, pull downs, especially today, because there was minimal rear delt in the thing I just did, all of those movements train the rear delt in its shorter position, kind of secondarily to the lats. And so this is just really only rear delt territory here. And also, because you can get the arm across the body, you're training the stretched range, whereas with any kind of row, you're just going to be training the short position, the squeezed range. So if you remember earlier, where I was talking about the unilateral stuff, why I think it's good to apply. On this kind of exercise where you're really getting into an extreme stretch or end range, it's especially useful because Oftentimes people have completely natural, normal asymmetries between sides. And for me, my right arm has an easier time getting this way than my left arm. And some of you may have noticed that. So what that leads to is I like to just position myself slightly differently. In the context of this exercise, I'm a little bit more comfortable getting deeper into that position than I am here. So I'll just turn a little bit less into my working arm when I do my left side. That's not good or bad. It's just something that accounts for both sides. I think a lot of people will make the mistake of assuming that it's something that needs to be fixed, when in reality, it's like you have asymmetry everywhere and that's totally normal. So, and even if you do have pain on one side, you should not try to draw a straight line from A to B, thinking that the reason you have pain is like only because of asymmetry or something. Because again, there are millions, and by millions, I actually mean billions of people who are not symmetrical at all, and a lot of them don't have pain. So I do think the single-sided stuff is good, just to account for how both sides like to move differently. So I make sure to incorporate it, especially with these more extreme end range positions. So I'm just doing 2 sets here, and that is it for today. All right, everyone, ending off today with a bunny talk. We got to get serious for a second here. One of the things that is constantly on my mind about the state of the industry is, and many of you who have been watching my content for a while will have heard me talk about this at some point, but I'm just going to repeat it forever, because if I can wake just one of you up to this reality, it will be worth it. Which is that so much of the content in the fitness space centers around making people feel like shit about themselves, both from the perspective of like I don't fault people. They want to post a shirtless picture, they want to like flex, like I just flexed my back, cool. But a lot of the content is more so catered toward this idea that like you as a person are missing something fundamentally, and and the solution to what you're missing is whatever I'm selling. That's like the model that a lot of people use. So the most obvious and pervasive one is the stuff around posture and asymmetry and pain, where you get people talking about things like anterior pelvic tilt, rounded shoulders, collapsed feet, knocked knees, forward head, upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome. The list just goes on and on and on and on. And basically what people have done is they talk about these concepts and they say, hey, do you have this? Right? To which most people respond, oh, yeah, I think I do have a little bit of like inward tilt of my feet. Yeah, that's me. Or I do have a little bit of, what looks like anterior pelvic tilt, which by the way is common amongst almost 90% plus people. So just remember that for moving forward. But anyway, the content strategy is promote something that's fear-based, i.e., do you have this postural problem? And then what they do is from that postural problem, they say, this is the common solution that doesn't work. Oh, is it stretching that you're trying to do? Yeah, that doesn't work. What the real root cause is this thing, right? And this thing is usually basically some bullshit variation of some model that someone created in the fucking 1970s or 80s that says, if this, then that. If forward pelvis, then the solution is to activate your hamstrings, not to stretch them. Or, oh, the solution is, you need to really get your left adductor going. Or, oh, you really need to work on right trunk rotation because that will recenter you, right? It's like basically the grifter playbook is present problem to you that you think that you have that you don't actually have and make it a problem for you, create a problem on your behalf, tell you why other people are wrong about their solution to the problem, and then present your own solution as if it's some kind of magic pill. And the reality is, and this is the very unfortunate reality, is that a lot of things fucking work. A lot of things work. A lot of things basically make it so that you do something that maybe you haven't done before. Oh, have you not ever done a lying hamstring bridge? Have you ever fucking exhaled in your life? Have you ever done an ab exercise? Because if not, it's likely that some intervention that you're prescribed will check one of these boxes, and then what will happen is you will start to assume that that thing is a magic pill until you recognize that your pain doesn't go away after X amount of time. It only actually goes away transiently. Let's say it disappears for a couple hours or maybe even a couple days, but eventually it comes back. Why does it come back? Because the exercises you're doing are exercises that you think that you have to fit your body into that you don't actually. The amount of volume that you're doing is maybe you're not keeping track of it. Maybe you have fucking 2,000 steps a day. Maybe you have 500 steps a day. I know people who literally have 2,000 steps in a week, right? So like all these huge rocks, like picking exercises that feel good for you, not the ones that other people tell you you need to do, using an appropriate amount of volume and effort relative to your current abilities, getting a good amount of daily steps, getting good sleep, and eating well. That's the fucking real playbook. But no one can really ultimately sell you on the real playbook in maybe super direct ways, right? So like I can sell you my upcoming biomechanics manual, oh, link right there or something. But by no means am I ever going to suggest that you buying the biomechanics manual will fix your pain, solve your pain, or get rid of any problem again, or present any problem as if you have it but you actually don't, and present as if I'm going to have some kind of magic solution. That's not how it works. For reference, the biomechanics manual is basically just a principle-based book to get you to understand the really, really fundamental variables in exercise like force and how muscles work. So that's all to say, long rant short, a lot of people will try to make it seem as if you have a problem that they have a solution to. And I can almost guarantee you almost 100% of the time that you don't have that problem, and that even if you did, that they probably don't have the solution. And that the solution to your problem will always be highly individual. It will not fall into some canned, clean model that someone has created for a generalizable kind of approach. It will be something that is very specific to you. And in many cases, it will be something that is really, really just obvious, like, hey, pick the fucking exercise that doesn't hurt. Or hey, stop sitting for 6 hours at a time. Maybe get up to pee every, 15 to 20 minutes just to like stretch out a little bit. Those sorts of things, tackle them, pay attention to them, and do not let people online convince you that you have problems that they can solve without even knowing you, okay? The next time you see someone doing that, hopefully this little ramble waves as a kind of red flag in your head that says, hey, watch out for this, because I can almost guarantee you that the next time you see something like that, you're going to be pulled into it and it will start to take control over you. Oh my gosh, I had this problem, that problem. Just let it be. You're a person, you're normal, you have asymmetries, you have things that look like problems that aren't. You have things that don't look like problems that might be. All right, my camera died, but that was pretty much the end of the rant. I hope it makes sense. And I hope you can see I'm passionate about it. Why am I passionate about it? Because I used to be someone who was in that position of just totally being controlled by narratives that other people espouse without ever actually thinking about it. So much as is sort of a theme through the rest of these videos, think for yourself, ask yourself if this thing that I think is a problem is actually a problem, or if I'm just sort of making an assumption that I have no logical or empirical basis to believe in. So anyway, as always, please leave a comment if you like this video. Ask me questions for future rambles and stuff like that. And if you enjoyed this video, like if you're really liking this content, I will ask you to do one thing and one thing only. Copy the link that you're watching this from. Go to the top tab or the share button and just send it to one friend. Just send it to one friend that you think would appreciate it. So thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time I do one of these. Who knows when it'll be? Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week. I don't know.